No one gets a single cent of my money. Not $1. Rebecca screamed with a cruelty that froze my blood. We had just returned from my husband Victor's funeral, and my daughter was unrecognizable. Her eyes gleamed with a greed I had never seen before. $300 million is mine now, Mom, she said, shaking the stack of wills in front of me. It's all mine. And you? You don't mean anything here anymore. It had only been 12 hours since I buried the love of my life, and my own daughter was throwing me out of the house Victor and I had built over 40 years of marriage. Rebecca, please, I whispered, still in my mourning clothes, makeup smudged with tears. We just buried your father. How could you be so heartless? I asked, my voice cracking. She scoffed. Do you know what heartless really means? It means living off Dad's money all those years. But those days are over. This house is mine, the money is mine, and you're out. Richard Collins, the lawyer, cleared his throat in the corner of the room. He had read the will that morning, confirming Victor left everything to his only daughter. But there was something in his eyes, something else. You have 24 hours to leave, Rebecca declared, strutting around the room like a conqueror. And don't ever bother me again. You're no longer my responsibility. 40 years you lived off Dad, but now you'll learn what it means to work. My hands trembled not from fear, but from rage boiling in my chest. This was the child I once cradled, taught to walk, comforted through nightmares. At least read the entire will? Richard said softly, his voice making Rebecca freeze. What are you talking about? She snapped, but for the first time since the will was read, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Richard looked at me, and I immediately understood. A faint smile touched my lips as I watched the color drain from Rebecca's face. Nothing important, he replied casually, but his smirk said otherwise. You'll find out soon enough. Rebecca stormed toward me, steps thunderous. I don't care what that paper says. The money is mine, the house is mine, and you're leaving now. She shoved me toward the door so hard I nearly fell. You know what? I don't even want to see you at another funeral. To me, you're already dead. The door slammed with a force that echoed like a gunshot through the house. I stood frozen in the garden as a light drizzle began to fall, staring at the home where I had been happy for 40 years. The windows we chose together, the garden we nurtured hand in hand, all of it now felt like ashes. I dragged my feet toward the car as if there were stones in my shoes. My mourning dress was soaked, but I didn't care. The rain's chill was nothing compared to the ice in my chest. Richard rushed after me. Mrs. Barbara, wait, he called, clutching a file tightly. I need to talk to you. It's important. I looked into his eyes and saw certainty, understanding the same expression Victor had when he had a secret plan. Is it what I think it is? I asked quietly. He nodded solemnly. Your husband was smarter than Rebecca thought, and you need to know the full truth before it's too late. I got into the car with him. As we pulled away, I caught a glimpse of Rebecca peeking out the living room window. Her face had changed, no longer triumphant, but anxious. Richard remained silent the whole ride to his office. Inside me, shock and a simmering fury began to burn. 40 years of marriage with Victor, building not just wealth but a family. And yet, my own daughter had cast me out like a stranger. Sit down, Barbara, Richard said when we arrived. His eyes showed a mix of pity and hope. I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, the same place Victor and I had signed our will years ago. His office walls displayed degrees and family photos, reminders of everything I had just lost. Barbara, there's something Rebecca doesn't know, he began, opening the file. Your husband was a very careful man. He understood your daughter's nature. I pulled a handkerchief from my purse and wiped the tears still streaming down my cheeks. "Richard, please. I've lost my husband. Now I've lost my daughter. Don't give me false hope." "It's not false hope, Barbara. This is a legal reality." He handed me a stack of papers. "Do you remember 6 months ago when Victor insisted on meeting privately with us and wouldn't let Rebecca come?" I nodded. That day, Victor said he had something private to discuss just between husband and wife. That was the day he added a special addendum to the will, a clause that only became valid under certain conditions. Richard pointed to a paragraph in the document. "If Rebecca shows extreme cruelty to you, especially during the mourning period, all assets revert automatically to you." My heart clenched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your husband knew exactly what kind of person his daughter was, and he made sure you would be protected." Richard smiled for the first time that day. $300 million, the house, the land, the investments, it all goes back to you, as long as we can prove Rebecca met the condition. My tears tasted different now, no longer just grief, but something else. Relief. Justice. "How do we prove it?" I whispered. Richard pulled out his phone and showed me the screen. A voice recording app was still running. I recorded the entire conversation this afternoon, every cruel word, every insult, every moment she threw you out of the house where you just buried your husband. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed not from pain, but from gratitude. Even in death, Victor was still protecting me. "There's more," Richard continued. He left very specific instructions. "You must let Rebecca believe she's won. Let her expose her true nature to the world. Only then can we activate the clause definitively." "So, I have to pretend I've lost everything?" "Yes. Your husband understood her better than anyone. He knew power would corrupt her quickly. And you'll need time to decide whether to reclaim everything or give her one final chance." I stood and looked out the window. Outside, the city carried on, unaware of the storm in my life. I thought of Victor, how he always stayed 3 steps ahead in business, and now, in protecting our family, he had done the same. "What do I do now?" I asked, still facing away. "Stay at a modest hotel. Make it look like you truly lost everything. I'll monitor Rebecca's behavior. What if she doesn't slip up? What if she's just grieving?" Richard placed a hand on my shoulder. "Barbara, you and I both know that's not the case. Today, Rebecca revealed who she really is. Your husband saw it coming and prepared for it." I carefully packed the documents into my bag. "How long do I have?" "The clause can be activated any time in the next 6 months, but your husband recommended waiting at least 30 days to observe Rebecca's pattern of behavior." We left the office as the sun set. Richard dropped me at a small hotel downtown, a place I never imagined staying, now my temporary refuge. "One more thing, Barbara," he said before driving off. "Your husband left a letter. He said to give it to you only after Rebecca revealed her true colors." He pulled a sealed envelope from his briefcase. "I think the time has come." Alone in the small room, I held the envelope with trembling hands. On it, in Victor's familiar handwriting, "To my beloved Barbara, the strongest woman I've ever known." My hands shook as I broke the seal. That unmistakable script, so elegant, so Victor. I sat on the bed, under the soft yellow light, and began to read the letter he had left for this very moment. "My dearest Barbara, if you are reading this, it means Rebecca has shown her true face, and my plan is unfolding as intended. Forgive me for not telling you sooner, but I needed your reaction to be genuine so she'd believe she had won." Tears slid down my face as I read on. "Over the years, I've watched our daughter grow more greedy and cruel. Remember when she fired Charles, our gardener of 20 years, just because he asked for a small raise? Or when she refused to help her cousin Angela after she lost her job? I saw how she treated our house staff, how she spoke of people less fortunate. I paused and looked out the window. Victor had seen clearly what I had been denying for so long. Our daughter had become a stranger. But there's one more thing you need to know. The $300 million in the official will is not the entire estate. There are other accounts, properties in your name, and investments only you and I knew about. The true total comes to $450 million. My heart nearly stopped. $450 million. Victor had been even wiser than I thought. Those additional accounts are at the National Bank, downtown Chicago branch, under your maiden name, Barbara Ann Miller. The master password is the date of our first kiss, May 15, 1985. Richard had all the necessary paperwork, but he would only hand it over when I was ready to take control. I kept reading, each line revealing Victor's meticulous preparations for this very moment. My task now was to watch. Let Rebecca believe she had everything in her hands, and then I would see how absolute power would corrupt her. She would spend, waste, and expose her true nature to the world. When the truth finally came out, she would have to learn the value of humility in the most painful way. But remember, the goal was never to punish her, it was to save her. Our daughter had lost her way, but there was still time for her to find her true heart again. Only through loss could she learn to cherish what mattered most. The letter continued with precise instructions. Victor had prepared everything down to the smallest detail, from trusted allies who would support me through the transition, to a step-by-step plan, not only to regain the estate, but also, he hoped, our daughter. He believed I would know how to make the right choice when the moment came. You are the wisest and most compassionate woman I've ever known. I trust you'll turn this tragedy into a chance for our whole family to grow. At the end of the letter, a note made me laugh through tears. P.S. In the bank you'll find another surprise. Our old friend Tobias has been quietly managing some tech investments outside the main accounts. Our real fortune may be even larger than you think. I love you forever, Victor. I folded the letter carefully and tucked it with the legal documents in my bag. My mind began processing everything. Victor hadn't just protected me financially, he had created an opportunity to teach Rebecca a lesson that might save her soul. I picked up the hotel phone and dialed Richard. "Barbara, are you all right?" he asked. "I read the letter," I replied. "Tomorrow I want to go to the bank. I need to understand everything before I decide what comes next." "Of course. I'll pick you up at 9 a.m. And Barbara, your husband was an extraordinary man. What he did for you, for your family, it's the deepest act of love I've seen in 30 years of practicing law. That night, I barely slept. Not from worry or grief, but from a strange sense of anticipation. Victor's death carried a clear meaning. Not to reclaim money, but to reclaim my daughter. The next morning, Richard arrived right on time. On the way to the bank, he explained more of what Victor had entrusted to him. Your husband began suspecting changes in Rebecca about 10 years ago. Since then, he quietly restructured part of the estate to make sure you'd be protected under any circumstance. At the bank, we were welcomed by Danielle, a private manager, an elegant woman, Mrs. "Barbara, I'm so sorry for your loss," she said as she led me to a private room. "Your husband was a highly respected client here, and let me say the arrangements he left behind were remarkably wise." For the next 2 hours, Danielle explained the true scale of Victor's wealth. Additional investments, international properties, and financial funds that had quietly grown for years. The total value, accounting for market changes since his passing, was now $462 million. I leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed not only by what he had achieved but also by the sophistication of his plan to protect the family. "And the accounts Rebecca knows about?" I asked. Danielle nodded. "They're real $300 million listed in the official will, but they are subject to the clause," Mr. Collins explained. "If that clause is activated, those funds will automatically revert to you as well." We left the bank with a completely new perspective. I was no longer a widow stripped of everything. I was a woman with the resources to change this story on my own terms. But first, I needed to see how far Rebecca would go as a millionaire heiress, unaware that every step she took was under my and Richard's watch. For the next 2 weeks, I became a silent observer of my daughter's unraveling. From my modest hotel room, with Richard's discreet support, I watched as Rebecca began revealing her true self to the world. The first sign came only 3 days after she threw me out of the house. Richard called, his voice heavy. "Barbara, she's fired the entire household staff. Clara, who had run the kitchen for 15 years. Nora, who had cleaned the rooms and practically watched her. Grow up. All of them dismissed with a week's pay, no reason beyond her words, no longer needed." Clara had called Richard in tears, asking if she had done something wrong. That woman had cooked thousands of meals for our family, treated Rebecca like her own daughter. "What reason did she give?" I asked, though I already knew. According to Clara, Rebecca said people like them had no place in her new life, that she would hire more upscale staff, suitable for her new status. I closed my eyes, feeling a knife twist in my chest. Victor had been right. Money was exposing the worst in our daughter, and it was terrifying. But that was only the beginning. A week later, Richard handed me surveillance photos Victor had arranged beforehand. In them, Rebecca walked out of luxury boutiques, arms full of bags worth more than a year of her former staff's salaries. "She spent $150,000 in a single day," Richard said, showing me the receipts. Clothes, jewelry, shoes, things she didn't need, bought only because she could. But what broke my heart most was a photo of her laughing with new so-called friends, shallow women who had appeared only after hearing about her inheritance. In the picture, Rebecca wore a golden dress worth more than Clara's car, raising a glass of champagne from a bottle costing thousands. "There's more," Richard added, his face grave. "Yesterday she went to the social club you and your husband had been members of for 20 years. She canceled your membership and demanded your name be removed from all records." "What?" "Ep," I whispered, as if punched in the stomach. "She said you no longer mattered and she didn't want your name attached to hers anywhere." I sank onto the hotel bed and cried not over a club card, but over the calculated cruelty of that act. Rebecca wasn't just enjoying her new wealth, she was deliberately erasing me from her life. That afternoon, I got an unexpected call. It was Charles, our former gardener, the man Rebecca had fired years ago for asking for a small raise. "Mrs. Barbara, I'm sorry to trouble you at such a hard time," his gentle voice said, "but I need to tell you what happened yesterday." He said he had gone to the house to pay respects, but Rebecca received him with icy contempt. "She told me people like me had no right to step into that house. She shouted at me to get out and never come back, that the poor had no place dirtying her new life." Charles's voice broke. "Mrs. Barbara, I thought of myself as her father for 20 years. I cared for that garden as if it were my own blood, and she treated me like garbage. After I hung up, I sat in silence for hours. Victor had seen it all, while I had been in denial. He knew that Rebecca's cruelty would only grow into a monster once fueled by wealth. The next day, Richard brought even worse news. "Rebecca is planning to sell off assets," he said, laying documents on the cafe table. "The beach house you two used for vacations, the downtown apartment Victor bought her in college, even the office where he built his career." "Why would she sell it all?" I asked, though I already suspected. "The broker said she wants quick cash to invest in deals promising fast returns. It seems some of her new friends are pushing her." In the days that followed, I watched quietly as Rebecca continued to destroy piece by piece the legacy Victor and I had spent our lives building. It wasn't just the material assets, it was the relationships, the values, and the honor my family had safeguarded for decades. The final straw came exactly 3 weeks after I was thrown out of my home. Richard called me at 6 a.m., something he only did when it was truly urgent. "Barbara, you need to come to my office right away. Rebecca just did something that changes everything." An hour later, I was seated at Richard's desk, staring at a video on his computer screen that left me breathless. It was footage from the security cameras at the Chicago Social Club, where Rebecca appeared at the annual charity gathering Victor and I had organized for 10 years. This year, the event was held in Victor's memory, and everyone expected Rebecca to make at least a symbolic donation to uphold the family tradition. Instead, we saw her stride in arrogantly, dressed like royalty, interrupt the event, and declare that all the family's pledged donations were canceled. "My father is dead," she told a stunned audience. "And with him those stupid charity games are dead too. That money is better spent on something worthwhile than wasted on people who don't appreciate it." The horrified, disappointed faces were plain to see in the video. These were people who had respected Victor for decades, who had watched Rebecca grow up, who had trusted our family. "There's more," Richard said, playing another clip. In the parking lot, Rebecca was confronted by Herman, a longtime friend of Victor and director of one of the supported funds. "Rebecca, your father would be ashamed," Herman said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "These donations help hundreds of struggling families. How could you be so cruel?" Rebecca's answer tore my heart apart. "My father was just a sentimental fool. I'm smarter than he ever was. Money is for enjoying, not for giving away to losers who don't know how to work." Richard stopped the video and looked straight into my eyes. "Barbara, I think it's time to activate the clause in the will." My daughter had gone far beyond any limit, but I had another plan. Victor had left not only the legal tools, but also the wisdom for me to understand this wasn't just about money. It was the final chance to save my daughter's soul. "Not yet, Richard," I said firmly after weeks of silence. "First, I want her to face the consequences of her own actions." And I didn't have to wait long. Karma arrived. Exactly 1 month after I was driven from my home, from the one place she least expected, her own friends, Richard called me one morning with news that left me both bitter and anxious. "Barbara, Rebecca's new investment partners have disappeared. They took $50 million. I collapsed onto the hotel chair, struggling to process it. $50 million, a sixth of what she believed she controlled. "How did this happen?" I asked, though deep down I already knew. Victor used to say, "Con artists can smell greed and naivety from miles away." According to the investigator still tracking her, Rebecca had met these so-called businessmen at a lavish party 3 weeks earlier. They promised to double her investment in 6 months through European art imports. Richard sent me the details. Fake names, fake bank accounts, a sophisticated scam targeting newly rich heirs like Rebecca. "The worst part is she signed every paper without consulting me," Richard said. She even declared she didn't need a lawyer anymore because she trusted her business instincts. That afternoon, I got a call I never thought I'd receive. Rebecca. Her voice was different, small, trembling. "Mom," she whispered. For a moment, I heard the same frightened little girl who used to run to me after nightmares. "Hello, Rebecca," I replied, steadying my tone. "I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" "Wherever you want," I said, noticing she avoided mentioning the house. "Could you come home?" 30 minutes later, I stood at the door of the place where I had lived happily for 40 years. Rebecca opened immediately, as if she'd been waiting. She looked a wreck, hair tangled, makeup smeared, still wearing the same blue dress from the night before. "Come in, Mom," she muttered, avoiding my eyes. The house was unrecognizable. The furniture Victor and I had chosen was gone, replaced with cold, modern decor. Family photos were missing, swapped out for expensive, soulless abstract paintings. Even the scent was different, as if the memories themselves had been erased. "What happened, Rebecca?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing. "I was conned, Mom. I lost $50 million. Everyone I trusted is gone." I sat beside her, suppressing the maternal urge to hold her. This was the lesson Victor had prepared, and I knew she needed to feel its weight. "So what are you going to do now?" I asked gently. I don't know," she cried. "The lawyer I hired says it's almost impossible to get the money back. The scammers used fake identities, offshore accounts. Even Richard refused to help me." Of course Richard refused. He knew this was part of Victor's plan. "Rebecca, why did you call me?" I asked directly. She looked up. I saw humility in her eyes. "Because I realized I have no one left. The so-called friends vanished the second they heard I lost money. I treated everyone who truly cared about me horribly, especially you. I'm sorry. What I did was unforgivable. I kicked you out right after Dad's funeral. I was cruel. I was vicious to you." It was the first time in years I'd heard her take responsibility. "So what do you want from me now?" I asked. "I don't know. I know I don't deserve it. But could you stay? Could you help me get out of this mess?" I agreed to stay that night, but not in the master bedroom. Rebecca had turned it into her own, erasing every trace of Victor. I slept on the living room couch, a reminder of my place in the house. Over the next few days, I watched Rebecca struggle with the fallout. The money she had left was still substantial, but the loss shook her. She realized money wasn't endless, that bad decisions had real consequences. "Mom, do you think Dad would be disappointed in me?" she asked during a quiet dinner. The question twisted my heart, because Victor had foreseen this exact moment. "Your father loved you deeply, Rebecca, but he also valued honesty, compassion, and responsibility. What do you think?" She lowered her head. "I think he'd be very disappointed. Not just because I lost the money, but because of how I treated you, Clara, Charles, everyone who ever loved us. So what do you plan to do to change?" I asked. I don't know. Some things can't be fixed, can they?" Her answer showed she was beginning to grasp the gravity of it, but the real test hadn't come yet. 3 days later, the second crisis hit. Richard called, his tone urgent. "Barbara, the bank is ordering a full audit of the inheritance accounts. Someone reported suspicious activity after the scam. They're going to freeze all assets for at least 2 months." I hung up and went upstairs to tell Rebecca. She was silent for a long time, then suddenly spoke in a calm voice. "Maybe this is what I deserve. After everything I've done, after how I treated everyone, maybe it's time I learned to live like a normal person." That answer gave me a spark of hope, But I knew the real trial would come in the weeks ahead, when she'd be forced to live without the safety net of her inheritance. Those 2 months turned into the most eye-opening period of my daughter's life. With the bank accounts frozen and only a little cash left, Rebecca faced financial limits. At first, she tried to maintain her lavish lifestyle with credit cards and the jewelry she'd splurged on. But as the bills piled up and payments came due, reality hit her like a cold slap. "Mom, I don't understand any of this," she said one morning, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by bills. "The numbers don't add up. The monthly expenses for this house are higher than any salary." It was the first time in her life Rebecca had ever seen the actual cost of maintaining our lifestyle. Victor and I had always shielded her, paying everything, sparing her from responsibility only. To raise a woman who had no concept of real value. "How much do you think it costs to keep this house running each month?" I asked, curious if she had any sense of reality. "I don't know. Maybe 5,000? She guessed hesitantly. 22,000, I said, laying out the utility bills, insurance, cleaning services she herself had hired after firing the loyal staff. Her face turned pale. And that didn't even include food, gas, or personal spending, just the basics to keep the lights on and the house functioning. Only then did she truly begin to grasp the seriousness of her situation. With no access to the main accounts and fixed expenses she had created, Rebecca quickly slid toward bankruptcy. "What am I supposed to do now?" she muttered. For the first time since childhood, I saw real fear in her eyes. "You could start by getting a job," I said calmly. She laughed bitterly. "A job? Mom, I don't know how to do anything. I've never worked a single day in my life. Who would hire me?" The question was both true and heartbreaking. Rebecca was 35 years old, with a college degree she had never used and absolutely no work experience. Victor and I thought we were protecting her by giving her everything, but in reality, we had left her utterly unprepared for the real world. During the following week, I watched Rebecca search for work. Her first attempts were both pitiful and full of delusion. She applied for managerial positions at large companies in Chicago, convinced that her last name and a college degree would be enough. "They said I need experience," she told me after her 5th failed interview. "But how do you get experience if no one gives you a chance?" I suggested, "Maybe you should start with simple jobs where you can learn as you go." At first, her pride pushed back fiercely. The thought of doing service work felt humiliating to her. But when the second electric bill went unpaid and the utility, a company threatened to cut the power, her perspective began to shift. After 3 weeks, she finally found a part-time job at a modest clothing store. The pay was $800 a month, an amount she used to burn through in a single shopping trip. "It's humiliating, Mom," she complained after her first day. "The manager is 20 years younger than me and treats me like I'm stupid. The customers are rude." "So how do you feel about working?" I asked, holding back the urge to mention the irony that she was now enduring what she once inflicted on others. "It's exhausting. My feet hurt, my back hurts. I don't understand how people can do this for decades." But something interesting began to happen after the second week. Rebecca started talking differently about her job and the people she met. "There's a woman named Leah on the morning shift," she told me. "She has 3 kids and takes care of her sick mother with 2 jobs. She never complains, never shows up late, always smiling. I don't understand how she does it." "Did you talk to her?" I asked. "Yes. She said she's been working there 12 years, since her divorce, raising her kids alone." Rebecca went quiet for a moment, as if processing it all. "Mom, I've been whining about losing $50 million, and she's probably never even seen 5,000 in her life. Yet she's stronger than me." It was the first time I had ever heard Rebecca genuinely admire someone who had neither wealth nor status. Victor would have been proud of that small step forward. The real turning point came a month later, when Rebecca witnessed something that shook her to the core. "Mom, something terrible happened at work today," she said one evening, her face stricken. Leah got a call from the hospital. Her youngest son had been in an accident and needed surgery that would cost $10,000. Insurance wouldn't cover it. "And then what happened?" I asked. "She just fell apart. I've never seen anyone so desperate. She said she didn't have the money. She'd already spent her savings on medicine for her mother. She had no idea what to do." Rebecca went silent for a long time, wrestling with herself. "Mom," she finally said, "I have jewelry worth more than that surgery. I have dresses that cost more than Leah makes in a year, and she has to choose between saving her son and keeping her family alive. What are you going to do?" I asked. "I want to help her," she said firmly. "I'll sell some jewelry. That diamond bracelet I bought last month for $5,000, I don't even like it. I'll sell it and give the money to Leah." That night, after Rebecca had gone to sleep, I called Richard. "How is the plan progressing?" he asked. "Better than Victor ever hoped," I replied. "She's truly changing. I see the kind-hearted girl she used to be." "Then it's time to reveal the truth." "Not yet. She needs one more trial to prove this change is real, not just desperation." The next day, Rebecca actually sold the bracelet and gave the money to Leah. When I saw the tears of gratitude in that working woman's eyes and the quiet satisfaction on my daughter's face, I knew we had reached a turning point. But fate had one last lesson for Rebecca, something even Victor hadn't anticipated. That week, a letter arrived that changed everything again. It was from another lawyer representing the estate of a distant uncle of Victor's who had recently passed. "Miss Rebecca," the letter read, "we regret to inform you that Thomas Anderson passed away last month, leaving you as his sole heir. His estate is estimated at $75 million. Rebecca dropped the letter, staring at me in shock. "Another $75 million, she whispered. "After everything I've been through, after everything I've learned, money comes back again. This was the final test." What would Rebecca do with a new fortune, after tasting hardship and learning empathy? The inheritance from Thomas was real, but there was one detail she didn't know. I had veto power over it, per a family arrangement Victor had set years earlier. Thomas, his uncle, had always respected Victor's judgment in family matters. I decided not to reveal that immediately. I wanted to see her true reaction. "I can't believe this," she muttered, reading the letter for the 5th time. "Just when I thought I'd lost everything, just when I learned to live differently, this comes." "And how does that make you feel?" I asked, watching her closely. "I'm torn," she admitted. 2 months ago, this would have solved everything. I'd have grabbed it and gone right back to my old life. But now I'm not sure I want that life anymore." She sat down, looking out at the garden Charles had once tended with such love. "Mom, do you know what I learned working at the store?" she asked. "Tell me." "I learned that I can do things I never thought I could. I can work 8 hours straight, solve problems, help people, and for the first time in my life, when someone says, 'Thank you,' I actually feel I deserve it." Her words filled me with a hope I hadn't felt in months. This was the Rebecca Victor and I had always dreamed of seeing one day. "But I also know this $75 million could help so many people," she went on. "It could help Leah, Clara, Charles, everyone I wronged when I thought money made me better than them. That night, Rebecca did something that stunned me. Instead of celebrating or rushing to claim the estate, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Making a list," she replied without looking up. "A list of everyone I've hurt, every mistake I've made, and how I can use this money to make things right." For the next 2 hours, I watched silently as Rebecca wrote down names, amounts, and detailed plans. Of course, Leah and her son were on the list, but so were Clara, Charles, the charities she had canceled, even co-workers at the store living on minimum wage. "Mom, can I ask you something?" she said softly when she finished. "Of course. Do you think Dad would forgive me for everything I've done?" The question pierced my heart, because I knew Victor had orchestrated this exact moment of self-awareness and regret. "Your father loved you unconditionally, Rebecca, but more than forgiveness, he wanted you to find your way back to the person he always believed you could be. Do you think I'm finding that path now?" Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was Richard, his voice urgent. "Barbara, I need to meet with you and Rebecca immediately. It's about Thomas's inheritance." "What is it?" "I'll explain in person. Can you both come to my office tomorrow?" That night I barely slept. I knew Richard wanted to discuss my veto power over Thomas's estate and that the time had come to make a defining choice for Rebecca's future. The next morning, we arrived early at his office. Rebecca wore her store uniform, since she had a shift afterward. Seeing her in simple clothes, in flat shoes instead of luxury heels, I realized how much she had changed these past months. "Please, sit down," Richard said with a grave face. "Rebecca, there's something you need to know about your Uncle Thomas's inheritance. Before he died, he set one very specific condition." Rebecca leaned forward, intent. "What condition?" "What?" Richard opened the file and pulled out a document. "This estate can only be released if your mother, Mrs. Barbara, signs a statement confirming that you have truly changed and are capable of managing such a fortune responsibly." Silence fell, heavy as stone. Rebecca turned to me, eyes wide with shock and relief. "Mom, did you know about this?" she asked. Softly. "I only found out last night when Richard called." I lied it wasn't time yet to reveal I had known from the start. "What do you think?" Her voice trembled. "Do you think I've changed enough to deserve this responsibility?" It was the question I had waited months to hear. "Before I answer, let me ask you something. If I said you weren't ready, if you lost this inheritance forever, how would you feel?" Rebecca thought long and hard before replying. 2 months ago, I'd have been devastated. I'd have begged, promised anything, even caused chaos. But now I think I'd still be okay. I've learned I can live without millions. I know I can work, contribute, be useful even without wealth. So if I said you are ready, what would you do with the $75 million? Without hesitation, Rebecca pulled out the notebook she'd written in the night before. "First, I'd fix my mistakes, make amends to those I hurt, restore the donations I canceled, and make sure no one suffers because of my selfishness again. After that, I'd use it to create real opportunities, scholarships, job training, support programs for single mothers like Leah. And what about for yourself? Enough to live comfortably, but not lavishly. I don't need to prove my worth anymore by what I buy or where I live." She smiled gently, a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Mom, these past months taught me that true wealth isn't in a bank account, but in relationships, in the difference you make in other people's lives, in being able to look in the mirror and respect who you see." Richard and I exchanged a glance. Rebecca had passed the final test. But there was still one truth she didn't know, a truth that would change everything. "Rebecca," I said, taking a deep breath, "there's one more thing you must know, something your father set in motion when he first began to worry about you." Richard opened another, much thicker file and spread it across the desk. Rebecca stared at it, not yet comprehending. "This is your father's real will," I began slowly. "The one he prepared, knowing exactly how you would react if you thought you inherited everything." "The real will?" Rebecca whispered, her face draining of color. "Your father never left you $300 million. Everything that has happened these past months, everything you've gone through, was part of a carefully crafted plan to save you from yourself." I explained everything that had been hidden: the clause that returned the estate to me if she showed cruelty, the existence of the additional accounts I controlled, and the truth that I had never lost my place as the primary heir. I had always known. I only wanted her to learn the lesson. "You mean," her voice broke, "you mean Dad loved me so much he was willing to let me believe I had lost his love just to save me. And you were willing to endure being thrown out of the house, endure my cruelty and contempt, because you knew that was the only way I'd find my true self." Rebecca collapsed completely. She didn't cry for money, but for the overwhelming love she had never seen before. "Dad knew I would become a monster," she sobbed. "And still, he found a way to save me." "And I endured every bit of your venom," I answered gently, knowing I could stop it at any time. I added, "Your father wrote in his letter that the goal wasn't punishment but to save you. And I was willing to bear all the pain if it meant I could get my daughter back." Richard handed us a box of tissues, quietly waiting while Rebecca poured out her heart. "So, the $50 million I lost to the scammers?" she asked through tears. "That was real," Richard replied. "That part wasn't planned. Your father had placed that money in accounts you could actually access, hoping you'd make mistakes to learn a worthy lesson. The con artists only sped up the process." "And Uncle Thomas's inheritance is real too," I added. "But as you know, it depends on my approval. Thomas was also part of your father's plan from the very beginning." Rebecca stayed silent for a long time, then looked up at me. In her eyes was a mix of pain, gratitude, and deep astonishment. "Mom, can you forgive me? Not just for these past months, but for all the years I was selfish, cruel, blind to everything you and Dad did for me." "I already forgave you, Rebecca. Forgave you from the very first day, because I believed the daughter I raised was still in there, hidden beneath greed and bitterness. So what now? What happens to all the money, the entire real estate?" I pulled out a document Richard and I had prepared the night before. "I've decided everything will be split equally between us, but under clear conditions. Your share will be held in a trust we both manage. Every major financial decision must be made together, and a large portion must go toward charity and making amends for the damage you caused. If you don't accept these conditions, you'll receive only a fixed allowance to live comfortably, but you won't have access to the main fortune. The choice is yours." Rebecca didn't hesitate for a second. "I agree. I accept all the conditions." She stood, walked to the window. "Mom, these past months I've learned something I never understood before. Money only has value if you use it to do good. Without that wisdom, it's just paper that corrupts the soul. As for my job at the store, I'm going to keep working there, at least for a while. Leah and the other women have become true friends, not like the people who clung to me before. And I like the feeling of earning my own paycheck, even if it's small." Richard began drafting the official documents while Rebecca and I talked about the next steps, But there was one more thing I needed to ask. Rebecca, be honest with me. You've changed your attitude. You've done all this because you've truly changed, or because you know I control the money? It was the most important question, the one that would decide if it had all been worth it. Rebecca thought carefully before answering. 2 hours ago, when I thought my fate depended on your approval for Uncle Thomas's inheritance, I had already decided that even if you refused, I would still try to be better. Not for the money, but because I actually like the person I'm becoming. She stepped forward and took my hand. Mom, these months of working hard, struggling, meeting people with real hardships taught me what 35 years of privilege never did. True wealth comes from relationships and the good you do in the world. Money is just a tool to make that possible. Are you sure you won't go back to the way you were? I asked. I can't promise I'll never make mistakes, she admitted honestly, but I can promise I'll never forget the lessons I've learned. And if I ever lose my way again, I hope you'll pull me back. That afternoon, we signed all the necessary papers. Rebecca officially became co-owner of an estate worth more than $500 million, including Thomas's inheritance and the investments that had grown during the crisis. But more important than the money, we had found our bond as mother and daughter again, with a chance to use the fortune to create real change. As we left Richard's office, Rebecca suddenly made a request. Mom, can we visit Charles? I want to apologize to him in person and not only give him his job back but expand the garden, maybe even start a training program for other gardeners. On the way to the car, I thought about the miracle I had just witnessed. Victor had been right all along. Sometimes, to save someone, you must let them hit bottom, let them learn from their own mistakes, and discover the true value of life. But there was still one, a last surprise, something even Victor hadn't foreseen. 3 months after our reconciliation, while hosting the very first annual meeting of the charitable foundation bearing Victor's name, a letter arrived that completely changed our understanding. It was from a notary in New York, informing us of a safe deposit box Victor had kept secret for years. The box could only be opened once certain conditions were met. Rebecca had to work for at least 3 months, truly help someone in need, and both mother and daughter had to sign a formal reconciliation. Dad even planned for this, Rebecca whispered as we read the letter together. He had a plan for after we'd already learned the lesson. That week we traveled to Manhattan. At the bank, the staff led us to the vault and opened a metal box. Inside, alongside some financial documents, was a collection of letters, all written by Victor in his last 2 years. The letters were dated, numbered, and meant for specific moments in our family's healing journey. The first was for when Rebecca learned the value of work. My dear daughter, Rebecca read aloud, tears streaming down her face. If you're reading this, it means you've discovered what I always knew you had: strength, independence, and compassion. Work is not punishment, but a gift connecting you to your own abilities and dignity. The second letter was for me. Barbara, the bravest woman I've ever known, my eternal love. Thank you for being strong when I could not. Thank you for loving our daughter enough to let her make painful mistakes. I know these past months were the hardest of all, but I also know only you could bring Rebecca back to her true heart. But the most moving was the final letter, marked for the moment when mother and daughter truly became a family again. My two loves, if you are reading this together, it means the miracle I always dreamed of has happened. Rebecca, you have learned that true wealth is not what you have, but what you give. Barbara, you have proven that real love sometimes demands the greatest courage, letting go so you can find each other again. But there is one more thing you both must know, something I kept secret even from Richard. Over the past 5 years, I quietly donated millions of dollars to charities across America and around the world. I didn't do it through the family foundation because I wanted complete secrecy. I paid college tuition for more than 500 underprivileged students, funded 3 hospitals in rural communities in the South and Midwest, created programs for single mothers, nutrition for children, and shelters for victims of domestic violence. I did all this without telling you, because I wanted to make sure that when you took control of the family fortune, it would be for the right reasons. During those years, I gave away nearly $100 million and set up a system to keep the donations flowing after my death if you prove yourselves ready. The true family estate, including the charitable commitments and earmarked funds, amounts to $650 million, the letter revealed. But it carries the greatest responsibility to use that wealth to change lives, not just to live comfortably. At the end of the letter, Victor left detailed instructions on how to continue the charitable programs, a contact list of the organizations he had supported, and a 20-year expansion plan, P.S. In this box, you'll also find the deeds to properties in the regions we've helped: the South, the Midwest, and 3 major cities in the East. These aren't vacation homes, but operations centers so you can personally oversee the impact of your decisions. I want you to meet the families you're helping, to see with your own eyes the lives being changed. Rebecca and I sat in silence for a long while, overwhelmed by all that Victor had quietly done and the responsibility now placed on our shoulders. "Mom," Rebecca finally whispered, "do you understand what this means?" "It means your father didn't just teach us about money and character," I answered. "He had prepared us to become stewards of a legacy that reached far beyond our family." In the weeks that followed, we began contacting the organizations Victor had quietly supported. Each conversation revealed another side of his silent generosity. The directors of orphanages didn't know how to thank the anonymous angel who had saved their institutions. Mothers who could raise their children because of the programs he funded. College graduates who never knew who had paid their tuition. "It's overwhelming," Rebecca admitted one evening as we read the impact reports together. "Dad helped thousands of people without ever wanting recognition or thanks. How can we ever be worthy of that example?" "We don't need to be worthy all at once," I replied. "We just need to begin, one step, one family at a time." We decided to visit the centers Victor had helped build. The first trip was to a rural hospital in the South that he had fully funded. Seeing doctors saving lives with equipment our money had provided, meeting families receiving free treatment, completely changed how we saw wealth. "This is what Dad wanted us to understand," Rebecca said, cradling a newborn whose life had been saved by the incubator we donated. "Money isn't a prize to be won. It's a tool God gives us to do good in this world." A year after our reconciliation, we officially established the Victor Anderson Foundation, with Rebecca as executive director and me as chairwoman of the board. Rebecca left her job at the store, but she kept her friendships with Leah and the other women. In fact, some of them even became staff at the foundation, using their real-life experience to identify and support struggling families. "Mom, do you know what the strangest thing is?" Rebecca asked at the launch of the 10th scholarship program. "What is it?" "I'm happier now, working 14-hour days to help others, than I ever was when I could buy anything I wanted." Dad was right. Real happiness comes from knowing your life has a purpose bigger than yourself. That night, as I reviewed loan applications for the microcredit program supporting single mothers, I reflected on the extraordinary journey we had taken. Victor hadn't only saved his daughter's soul, he had transformed our entire family into something greater and more meaningful than ever before. "Mom, do you think Dad would be proud of us?" Rebecca asked as we signed off on 50 new loans. I looked at my daughter once, a selfish, ruthless heiress, now a woman dedicated to changing the world one family at a time. I thought of Victor, of the intricate plan he had devised to save us all, of his faith that love and wisdom could triumph over greed and selfishness. "I believe your father knew exactly what we would become," I answered. "And I think right now, wherever he is, he's smiling. Because his plan didn't just succeed, it surpassed even his most hopeful expectations." Rebecca smiled and returned to her work. Outside, the city slept, unaware that in a small office, 2 women worked late into the night, planning to use an entire fortune to change the world. Looking back on everything that happened, I realized the most precious gift Victor left us wasn't the vast fortune, but the lesson of love, family, and responsibility. He taught Rebecca and me that money can be lost and regained, but if a family loses trust and compassion, that is the greatest loss of all. Today, I no longer see Rebecca as a selfish, lost child, but as a woman learning to walk on her own 2 feet, learning to bow her head, to rise again, and to live with her heart. Sometimes, to truly find each other, we must endure pains that feel unbearable. But it is precisely those losses that reveal the real value of love and forgiveness. And what about you? If you were in my place, would you be willing to endure so your child could learn the greatest lesson of their life? I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you want to continue this journey with me, where we don't just listen to stories but also reflect and learn together, stay with us for the next chapters. Because perhaps in each story, we may discover a piece of our own lives.